Hello and welcome to Tips for the Transition. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan, your host. I'm passionate about helping women move beyond coping and surviving major life events so they can learn to thrive. I know for a fact, from my own experience and from working with my woman clients, that fear can be our undoing. It can stop us in our tracks, and it can keep us stuck where we are instead of allowing us to spread our wings and step outside our box and becoming who we're meant to be. Major life changes can bring up lots of fear. So today, we're going to meet a woman who is an expert on moving people beyond their fear of speaking or beyond their fear of success or failure or flying. What is your greatest fear? My guest is Christy Demetrakis. She is a speaker and the author of 2 wonderful books about conquering fear. Welcome to our New Year's edition of Tips for the Transition. Hello, Christy, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Maria. I'm so glad to be here, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. So you and I come from very similar, long corporate backgrounds. Let's start with your story. Tell us a bit about your professional start.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I have to start by saying I am a Tar Heel. So I'm going way back. My husband and I both graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. And I have to say that because both of my kids go to the University of Louisville. We are officially empty nesters now. And I can only say go Cards at the games because we are Tar Heels. So anyway, after college, my professional career started with Ralston Purina Pet Food Company. And I was with them for about 5 years in sales. And I left there after I got my MBA and went to work for Fort James Corporation. And Fort James is the maker of Brawny paper towels, Quilted Northern bathroom tissue, if you're still familiar with those brands. I then left there and went to work for Coors Brewing Company, which was a surprise to many people because my family, we do not drink, have never really drank. And so people were like, I don't understand why you would go work for a company like Coors. And I said, well, hey, I didn't have a dog when I sold pet food, so it's good. It's just another product to sell. And I stayed there for 5 years until I had a bit of a moral dilemma when my 3-year-old asked me, Mommy, what's beer? And I said, Ruh-roh, Houston, we have a problem. And so I left Coors and went to work for the Gillette company. And I was with Gillette for 5 years up until we were purchased by Procter & Gamble. And so that's been 20 plus years, but I have been with Procter & Gamble technically for about 9 years, but I get credit for the Gillette time. So that's been my career. I've been in sales 98% of that time, except for a small stint with Coors Brewing Company when I did logistics.
Interesting background and very varied in terms of your industries. That's so tell me about how, coming from that background, how did your faith to conquer fear message come to life? And was there a transition in your life that made that message personally relevant?
Well, here's what's interesting. When I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, my degree was in speech communications and radio television. And I had every intention of being someone's anchor person, sitting behind that desk, talking about the news or whatever it was. And then I had an internship and realized they didn't make very much money until they got to a certain level. And I said, well, there is a lifestyle to which I am personally accustomed. Therefore, I will pursue some other alternative means of occupation. And so that's how I got into sales. I ended up getting an internship with Ralston Purina the summer before my graduation, and kind of fell in love with sales. But all the while that I was working in sales and working for these different companies, I still had in the back of my mind this desire to be a professional speaker or a public speaker. I used to do training of my classmates and things in college, but I never really knew at that time, because technology, internet wasn't readily available back then. Feels like a long time ago now. But all of that wasn't available. So I didn't see people like Les Brown and Tony Robbins doing the thing that they do and knowing that that was a viable option for me. So I went into sales. But for 13 years, my mom and I used to have this conversation probably 2 times a week. And I go, Mom, I really wish I could. I really want to. I wish I could. But, as the years pass, what happens? You have kids, you're married, you get a car payment, you have a house payment, you have this payment, you have that payment. All these things make it more and more difficult for you to do the thing that you have in your heart to do. And so I stayed in sales, stayed in my career. And so about the time when I came to Ralston, not Ralston Puritan, Procter & Gamble, I was looking to be promoted. When I came out of college, my goal was to be the vice president of somebody's company. I didn't care whose company it was, and clearly I've worked for 5, but I always knew I would need to be the vice president of somebody's company. But as I got further and further along in my career and my desire increased to be this professional speaker, public speaker, I started to realize the real reason I really wanted that vice president title was so that it would give me credibility with people. Because I didn't feel like people would listen or believe that my experiences were valuable without that criteria, without that big title behind my name. And so I was striving. And at Procter & Gamble, we have this thing called a list, a promotable list. And from band 1, band 2, band 3, band 4, those are our salary ranges. There's this list. And if you're on this list, then you're eligible to be promoted. Okay. And so from the time I was with P&G, one minute I was on the list, then it seems like I wasn't on the list, and then I was on the list, and I wasn't on the list. So it was really a roller coaster. And I had gotten to this one point in my career where they were saying, Christy, you're right on the edge. You're about to be promoted. And here is your signature project that's going to get you promoted. And I said, great, finally, I know what I need to do to get this promotion. And about the time that project was really starting to launch and kick off, another person came to my team who was considered a highly developmental candidate, and they gave my project to her. And you can imagine I was confused, and I was very disappointed because I couldn't understand, well, if this was my signature project and what my promotion was going to be based on, now that I don't have this project, now what? And that weekend, that happened on a Friday, and that weekend I went home and I cried and I cried and I cried some more and I cried some more. And I was sitting in church and I'm still crying on that Sunday. And I was supposed to meet with my manager on that Monday because she knew I was very upset about it. And as I'm sitting in church and I'm crying, all of a sudden this peace came over me. And I heard a voice in my head say, why are you crying? You don't even want this anymore. And I said, Christy, you're right. You don't want it anymore. And I hadn't wanted that vice president role for a long time. But I had said it to myself for so long that I thought that's what I had to say, that's what I needed to say. And if I wasn't aspiring to that, then what was I aspiring to do? And so I came in that Monday and I sat down with my manager and I said, you know what I've decided? I've decided that I no longer want to be on the list. I'm removing myself from this list. I'm content to stay where I am. I love the things that I'm doing at this company, but I also love the things that I'm doing outside of the company. And I loved the ability to be able to balance and do both. And she looked at me and she said, the weight of the world just fell off your shoulders, didn't it? And I said, yeah, it did. And at the same time as that was happening, I had just released my first book, Faith to Conquer Fear, Inspiration to Achieve Your Dreams. And it was really the writing of that book that helped me to come to that realization that I no longer wanted it. But again, was afraid to say it. And I really believe that removal of that special project was God's way of just giving me that extra nudge that I needed to make that decision and commit. And so all of that happened when I turned 40. I turned 40 in August. I published the book in October. I lost that. I took myself off the list in November. And I'm telling you, Maria, I have not been happier since. It was the best decision I could have ever made. So that was really the major transition for me, was almost being forced to take myself off of that list. But I firmly believe that my book helped me to get to that place.
Oh, that is so inspiring to me, Christy. because so many of us, we think and believe we want something for a very long time, and it becomes part of our DNA. I don't know how else to explain it. Every behavior that we portray just solidifies that belief. And it's just so inspiring to me that the writing of your book, Faith to Conquer Fear, the first one, helped you without even realizing it until you got to church that morning. And it became very clear to you. The angels came, God spoke, whatever it was for you, it became very clear to you. And I think many transitions are just like that. Finally, the clarity comes. For me, I've always said about when it happens for me, it's like light dawns on marble head. That's what it is for me. So I thank you very much for sharing that part of your story, because I think it will help greatly to frame the rest of our conversation very well. So, to our listeners, we're going to continue this chat with Christy, and you're going to hear about the art of conquering fear. It is a 3-step process to help you overcome the limiting fears keeping you from reaching your goals and dreams. So I invite you to stay tuned for the next video when Christy is going to share step 1, which is called acknowledging. Meanwhile, Christy has generously offered to share chapter 1 of her second book, Faith to Conquer Fear, The Journey, with you. So to request it, take a look at the link below the video here. Mark that down, or click on the description below the video, and that'll take you to the link. So thank you so much, Christy, for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
And for all of our viewers for joining us as well. And please watch for the next in the series of conversations with Christy as she shares more of the art of conquering fear. Let me leave you with this quote from the Bible. It's in 2 Timothy 1:7. It's one of my favorites. And when you download Christy's chapter 1, you're going to see it again. For God has not given us a spirit of fearfulness, but one of power, love, and sound judgment. Keep that in mind. Till next time.